you have a healthy family, every member of the family feels they belong. And even if their political attitudes is very different from their families, they're given a feeling, we may disagree with your politics entirely, but we love you, you're one of us. That's a healthy family, and a person doesn't doubt that, and that's the most strong source of life, of living, that the person knows he has people who love him, he has people who are there for him, who are there for him through thick and thin. They may criticize him, but they're on his side. That's a healthy family. And that always was the source of Jewish life throughout the generations, because a person knew he has a family behind him, regardless of what he did. And thank God that's still there. In other words, no one starts checking if some Jew is taken captive somewhere. No one starts asking, wait a minute, is this person gay or lesbian? If he's gay or lesbian, we're not going to help this person. He's family, he's part of us, and the Jewish people will be there for him. So thank God that is agreed, I think, almost above board. The person may be an idolater still, yes? In the Middle Ages, there were questions of what's the law, the din about a Jew who, God forbid, becomes Christian. But the bottom line is he remains Jewish. So that is the first thing. Now, there may be criticism. You may say, I think what you're doing is wrong. But the most important thing is not to say we're going to judge. The Lubavitcher Rebbe used to tell his shlichim, your job is to love people, not to judge them. And his shlichim around the world, they love people, they're not judging them. And that's what attracts people to Yiddishkeit, because no one thinks that the Lubavitcher Chassid is saying, oh, if you don't keep Shabbos, it's okay. Every Israeli who goes to a Chabad house in Asia or in South America knows that according to this Chabad person, they should be keeping Shabbos, but we love you whatever you are. And the same thing goes for attitude. In other words, it's so important that rabbis, first of all, and teachers check their own attitude. It's so important that they should say, what is causing me to feel maybe uneasy? And it's okay for a rabbi or teacher to say, you know, the whole subject of homosexuality makes me feel uneasy. I can identify some homophobia in myself. It's okay. Honesty is the most important thing. But if a person's honest about it, they're less likely to bring out laws and rules and regulations out of their own tendencies. The whole aspect of introspection in the rabbinic world and the halacha world is sorely lacking. The training isn't as rigorous there as it is in the world of psychology in which I deal, because in the psychological world, a therapist has to learn to look at his own attitudes, his transference, his countertransference, his projections, and to check himself at every single meeting, if not at every single minute. And so rabbis are not so much trained to do that, to check, why am I saying this? What are my feelings here coming up? And they're more likely to reflect their feelings and their fears and their phobias rather than saying, here's someone from my family, I love him. Now what you're doing, you're going to ask me a halakha question, I can tell you what the halakha question is, but the attitude wouldn't threaten them. As these are not questions of identity. Identity, one's Jewish. The Gemara says that a hadass, a myrtle, which grows amongst thorns, is always hadass. It doesn't become a thorn because it grows amongst thorns. Yisrael, afapi shechata Yisraelu. A Jew who sins is still 100% a Jew. Thank God there's no 50% in these things. And so this person is entirely Jewish. It's no difference between if he's doing, God forbid, one Aveirah or another Aveirah. There's a much deeper problem here. You asked me about the question of legitimizing gay and lesbian marriage. Obviously, you don't find vegans going around saying this is the vegan parade. And the vegans are often very big missionaries. You know, whenever I'm speaking to a vegan, I have to feel guilty about having eaten an egg. Yes, if he's a real, stark vegan. But they don't go around doing vegan parades. Why not? Because they're not under attack, because no one's fighting the vegans and saying you're not allowed to be a vegan. So this is a response, this is reactive. Being reactive to something reactive doesn't attain much purpose. In other words, the gay parades are reaction to something, and I imagine that they'll peter out in the fullness of time. But these are people who felt oppressed for so many years, they feel the need for solidarity because being homosexual is so, so lonely. And the Orthodox world often is lacking in compassion. The first thing one needs to attempt to do when you meet someone, whether they like you or different from you, is try to have one's heart open and feel what they're feeling. And when you're trying to feel that and feeling empathy and feeling compassion, which is after all the highest of God's attributes, the keter, you're feeling compassion, you're not in a mode of judging at all. And then you don't think you're giving legitimacy, yes? Suppose you were to tell me, Yehoshua, I was in a hurry to get to this festival, so I was driving at 140 kilometers an hour. Yes? Now you're telling me this, I'm not going to, when I nod, I'm not nodding saying that's okay. And you don't seek legitimacy from me. You're telling me something, but many rabbis have this thinking that people seek legitimacy from them. Who am I to give legitimacy to? I'm as nothing as anybody else. So the whole idea of giving legitimacy, if I sit with a Reform rabbi giving him legitimacy, he's not asking me for legitimacy. Yes? And legitimacy isn't yours to give out. So the feelings are feelings of fear. And when I feel a fear, the thing I have to do is face the fears in myself rather than trying to act them out with someone else.
איך אתה אומר המרה?
Oh, changing one's tendencies.
Tendencies?
Tendencies, yes.
Do you believe in tendencies?
In tipulei hamara, you ask me if I believe that I'll answer your questions, okay.
כן, אבל אני אשאל את זה.
No, definitely.
Do you believe in
changing? That tendencies can be changed.
Okay. Do you believe in changes? Changes?
In this field,
changes?
Changes in this field.
Changes. Do you believe in changes? Do you believe that tendencies can be changed?
Well, it's not something I'm an expert on, but I think that anyone relating to it has to ask themselves the question, would I be able to become a homosexual? In other words, most heterosexuals cannot even imagine becoming homosexual. They can't imagine, if they're a man, they can't imagine really being attracted to a man sexually. If they're a woman, they can't imagine being attracted to a woman sexually. Some can, some can't. Obviously, some people have better imaginations than others. But one have to ask oneself, could I change my tendencies? And if I don't think I could change my tendencies, how can I expect from someone else? But furthermore, often it's not respecting a person where they are. Now, one of the most central things in therapy is suppose someone does come because they want to change, and that's not always the case. Some homosexuals, not for a minute, think they can change. They don't feel they can change. Maybe some of them want to. I remember a certain very well-known Rosh Yeshiva in a meeting with homosexuals being asked, how long do we have to suffer? After how many years are we allowed to come off the cross? We have to go through 5 different types of therapies, 15, until we can say, I've tried everything. In other words, how long are we supposed to suffer? And I think there's often, if one acts in a mode of compassion, one will hear what a person desires. And I suppose a person asks, I'd like to change my tendencies, one can possibly show the person in dynamic therapy that they have lots of voices in themselves. And maybe that it's not a thing of categorization, because as Judith Butler has already shown, at least some would agree with her, we have a whole range of sexualities. We have a whole range of tendencies, and some are more dominant and some are less dominant. And then maybe the person wants to meet other parts of themselves which are more dormant. I've worked with homosexuals who've spoken about having different tendencies, and once they don't feel on the defensive, maybe something will change, but it's never for one person to tell another person, you should change. That's a cruel thing to do.
Let's talk about marriage. How do you explain that a lot of people, for religious people, get married later and not early?
Well, first of all, one of the things which is so problematic in any system, and Judaism is no exception in this, is that one always has to know that different people have different times. And the hardest thing is educating a person, a child or anyone, to really find what is true for them. For some people, it's really very good and right and fitting to get married young. And for some people, that's the worst thing they can do to themselves. And to say everybody should do one thing or the other is really a mistake. I mean, in the Torah, in Chazal, some got married young, some got married old. So it's a mistake to think everybody should be doing the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean that some people who get married young wouldn't have been better off getting married when they're 30 or 40. And it doesn't mean that some people who get married when they're 30 wouldn't be better for them in some ways. Paradoxical, it's hypothetical. But some people happen to meet someone they love. Even if they weren't intended to get married, they suddenly fall in love when they're 18 or 20, and they say, why look further? I'm happy with this person. And if things go well and they work well on their marriage, they can be happy till 120, as they say. And some people decide, I want to get married young. And then they may find the right person, may find someone who, afterwards turns out to be not good for them. Just today I had a conversation with a woman who's very well known in the Orthodox world, who got married very, very young, and she realized fairly early that it was a really big mistake, and she's very happy to have got divorced. She's still very young, early 30s, and very happy to got divorced. For her it was a mistake, but she was mistaken. And to say everybody should do one thing or the other thing is certainly fallacious. But it's a problem, it's harder often to get married when one's older, because some people, it's less easy to get involved, to fall in love, to allow oneself to simply fall. You know, when you're young, your limbs are supple, you're flexible, you can fall down and get up again, fall down and get up again. Then you're not so rigid and afraid to fall in love, because love should be a falling in love. It's sad if it's just technical. And one gets older, and often people are more afraid, and they're more rigid, and their interests are much more narrow. And if they're in the field of contract law, they'll find it hard to get interested in family law. I'm being a little bit sarcastic, of course. In others, they're afraid to be curious. If you're not curious about the other person, it's so hard to fall in love, because falling in love means you're curious about the other person. You want to know everything about the other person. You want to know what they ate for breakfast. But when a person narrows down, sometimes it's hard to be so curious and young and subtle. And so it does get harder for many people. And it needs such hard work to leave one's heart open. Mishlei says, Mikol mishma notzor libecha. Our hearts are the source of life. One needs to make so certain, work hard, that our hearts don't get closed off. Because when that happens, we've already started growing old.
What do you think about mixed marriages?
Okay, you mean mixed marriages, not with someone non-Jewish, of course, but one partner is Orthodox and one partner keeps mitzvot. I think the word Orthodox is a little bit misconstrued, and one person doesn't keep mitzvot. So first of all, it's not easy. But if a person wants to be Oved Hashem, wants to, grow in love of God, so they don't see things as problems, they see things as challenges. Someone who's running, he doesn't see the hill as, oh, there's a problem here. He sees it part of the path. He doesn't say, oh, why is there a hill in the way? Why is there a mountain for me to climb? No, he welcomes a challenge because he grows through challenges. So the most important thing the Rambam teaches, the most important thing for friendship is to have the same goal. Now, if one's goal is a narrow goal of keeping mitzvahs, then you're going to be very misconstruing everything. You see, one of the biggest problems in Orthodoxy nowadays is that so many people think that the purpose of the Torah is to do this and not to do that, and to keep mitzvot, rather than realizing, as Chazal say, that the purpose of mitzvot is to make us closer to Hashem, is to make us better human beings. So if a couple says, our purpose in life is keeping mitzvot, and that's it, so of course it's going to be a very big problem that one does keep mitzvot and one doesn't. One keeps Shabbat and the other doesn't, even if they both respect each other. And of course it's an even bigger problem how to bring up the children. And that has to be agreed upon, because otherwise it's going to be a technical problem. Just as if one person wants to bring up the children left-wing and one right-wing, one wants to have anthroposophic education, one wants more traditional. It's always going to be problems. But if they can agree on what their role, that they're both seeking truth, they're both speaking goodness, they're both seeking compassion, they want to raise their children to higher values, then these things can be worked out. One of the very sad things that I've met this again and again in modern Orthodoxy is that often Orthodox people don't think about values. Because they say the purpose of our raising our children is to pray 3 times a day, keep Shabbos, eat kashrus, they don't ask themselves questions of values. Do I want to bring up my children as the main value is justice, is honesty, truth, wisdom, kindness, compassion? I'm not saying these things contradict, but you've got to think about values. And if a couple feels what is most important for us is to raise our children as compassionate, good, kind people, then they may be able to agree that the mitzvot are not the problem, and they'll be able to reach the way they'll do it together. But they'll be respecting that they both see the purpose of life as not just you and me and you, but something much higher, and then they can grow as a couple together because they're going the same path together. In the temple, the Kruvim were not just looking at each other all the time, that sometimes looked together in the same direction, but it was always entirely parallel. they're always entirely mirroring each other. And as Khalil Gibran says, love is not just looking one each other in the eye, love is looking together in the same direction. So if you have a couple who really feel they're looking together in the same direction, they're part of a common dialogue. They go to sleep talking together, and wake up talking together, and they're sharing their lives together because they're looking for someone to share their lives. And you do see that, and I see the other, and they feel that togetherness. So everything is not a problem, it's a challenge. How are we going to face this challenge? This is interesting, this is fun. I'm curious how we'll come out of this.